Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Light at the End of the Funnel podcast. I am here with Michael Neeley, who is a mentor and business strategist for visionary solopreneurs. He's a former professional actor in Medieval Knights, an author and a speaker, and he hosts the podcast Consciously Speaking, Buy This Not That, and Something to Whine About. Like wine, W-I-N-E. He's also the founder of the Authority Academy, and he trains and supports heart-centered entrepreneurs in professional speaking, virtual summits, getting published, and designing and hosting their own podcasts to massively grow their business and expand their audience. So you can learn more about him at www.michaelneeley.com or at www.yourauthorityblueprint.com. So thanks for joining us today, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
The Medieval Knight.
It's so exciting to be here. I love what you've got built on. The light at the end of the funnel is just it's incredible.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It was a download. That one came very quickly. So I'm like, I better run with this before somebody else grabs it. But yeah, we've been having a great time with it. So this is our third season.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, and you can even talk about Medieval Knight and how you came into that if you want. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about you and your brilliance.
Well, thank you. My brilliance. Let's put that knight thing to bed. So yeah, I used to joust and sword fight professionally for 12 years. I finished my degrees in acting in Southern California, and I heard about this place, Medieval Times, where they were hiring guys to ride on horse and swing swords and joust for a live theater show. Yeah. And so I applied and got hired there and ultimately became the head knight and show manager. So I traveled around to their different locations throughout the United States, opening up new castles, hiring guys to also teach them how to ride a horse and sword fight and joust. And so I did that for 6 years with them, and then I jousted for another 6 years with the New York Renaissance Fair while I was acting in New York. So wow. It was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That stood out.
My share of injuries. It feels like it was a lifetime ago, but I'm, it's a neat piece to have in my past. But when I stopped acting, I was living down in LA, and my son was born in 2001, and then I moved up to Santa Cruz. He was born in 2002. I moved up to Santa Cruz in 2004, and gave up the acting stuff and got into different work. And so,
very cool.
It all kind of led to where I'm at today. Yeah.
Did you ever do the jousting in the medieval times in Florida? Because I saw one in Florida.
I did. Yeah.
I saw it was
only a couple of shows.
It was I think it was 2000. I went and I saw one, so I'm like, I wonder if I saw him. Didn't know it.
Yeah, I was already long gone by then. I left. I stopped jousting for them. I think it was 92.
Wow.
I stopped jousting. Yeah, so I was with them from 86 to 92.
Very cool.
Dating myself. My goodness, that seems so long ago. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that. It's podcast. But with the live video, yeah you do. So awesome.
It's pretty obvious. Yeah, so, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing and humoring me a little bit on that one, because I want to know more. Very cool. So I want to talk a little bit about your area of genius, where you talk about the 4 pillars of authority. How did you even start with the pillars? This is really incredible work.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, thank you. And you know what? It's one of those things that I just stumbled upon, really. Like literally from start to finish, it was almost stumbling upon it. And so the first thing that happened is when I shifted careers, moved up to Northern California, Central Coast, I got into the pharmaceutical industry for a while, and I started creating and developing these ideas for a book that I wanted to write on human behavior. And I was approached by a publishing house that took interest in it, and they gave me a questionnaire. It was very interesting as I'm filling out this acquisitions questionnaire, as they call it. And I get to the section where they're asking questions like, how many people are on your mailing list? How many Facebook fans do you have? How many Twitter followers do you have? And it made me realize, oh, wait a minute, they want me to sell the book. And of course, since then I've learned, I mean, that's why they call it a best-selling author, not a best writing author,
Yeah.
because you have to sell books.
Yeah.
And I realized I didn't have a platform, and just the confluence of time around this was so perfect in the timing. I was working with a client, coaching them, and he was having some great breakthrough moments. And I asked if he minded if we recorded the session. And so we did, and we played it back afterwards. And he said, "This really sounds amazing. You should start a podcast." And I had no idea what a podcast was. I had heard the word, but didn't know about it or anything. And 2 weeks later, after a little bit of research, I launched my first show, Consciously Speaking. And this was in 2014. And I realized, and why it all made sense to me, was like, oh, this is a great way to start to build my platform to support and sell the book that I want to write. And quickly from then the podcast, I decided to do a virtual summit because I knew the value of that, how it could grow the list, elevate my authority, and so forth. So I did the virtual summit. And then all of a sudden I started getting invited to speak on other people's stages, started doing some of my own smaller like meetup group speaking events, and then ultimately led to my 3-day live event. And in the process, my book is getting fleshed out through all of the talking that I'm doing on my show. And so then I had already built this audience so that when my book was released, then I had buyers built in as well. So I kind of stumbled upon this pattern, and I realized looking back at it, many people were asking me, how did you advance so quickly? How did you get known so quickly in the field that you're in such a short period of time? And I realized that it was the way that I interweaved these 4 elements, the podcast, virtual summits, speaking from stage, and getting published, how I interweave those in a way that feeds them all and makes it exponentially more powerful.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it evolved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like one of the most powerful things that you can do is build a platform, and everybody has an answer to it, but I like how you kind of stacked it. So that being said, the podcast first, what's the powerfulness behind creating the podcast first?
I think there's multiple levels in starting with the podcast. And one of the things that makes it a great starting spot is that the ease of entry is phenomenal. It's not a high cost item. You can start a podcast for under $100. It doesn't require rocket science to start it. It's not something that you have to learn a whole bunch of technical stuff. And it really is a ground floor to start expanding your network and your audience. You're going to be bringing on guests who ultimately, a lot of my guests have become friends and business partners in many avenues. And it also elevates your authority in the process, and your audience starts to grow. So Consciously Speaking now has been listened to in over 190 countries, which blows me away still that somebody in Zimbabwe decided to download and listen to my show. So that's kind of wild. So it's just such an easy thing. Then you can easily nurture it as well as you go about doing the other items in the 4 pillars.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love how you talk about the ease of access, and that's absolutely true. I mean, there's a few things that you need, not even a few, like a couple things you need. And I've always found that podcasting is such a great way to meet and collaborate with like-minded people. Like everyone it is, and it's just like, oh, this is just like blowing my mind every time I get to learn. So I love that you start with a podcast, and I can see how that filters over into the next pillar, which is the virtual summits. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, totally. Because the virtual summit is really just a collection of podcasts, although some people do it on video, but there are also video podcasts. So it's just a collection of those that are defined around a unique topic and then delivered in a slightly different way. And whereas your podcast is completely free and accessible to anybody throughout the world with just the click of a button, your virtual summit, you want to be shared to people who opt in for it by providing their name and email address. And that, of course, is your major list builder that allows you to then market and, provide services to people who now you have connection with. And then the next step that makes a virtual summit so nice as well, of course, is that you can make it available for just a short period of time, but for those people who want to have access to it in perpetuity, you offer it to them at a discounted price, and they can pay to have those recordings. And so you also monetize a virtual summit quickly and easily. And so that's the natural value and way to flow right into it. And of course, the whole time, you're supporting, signups with your virtual summit through announcing it on your podcast. And then from the platform of the people who sign up, you're promoting your podcast as well.
Yeah.
So more listeners.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way to partner with people you've already gained that like, know, and trust factor, your speakers, and just like, hey, do you mind promoting this?
Yeah.
And it just, of course, this is a great episode. I'm so excited to promote it. So I love how there's that natural flow between podcasts and virtual summits, and then how you've shown how to monetize it too, which the thing that came forward to me when you were talking about the podcast, one of the biggest pain points is, how do I collect emails? How do I nurture these guys more? And you've kind of solved that problem with going into a virtual summit. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very nice. I love it. Okay. So podcast, virtual summit, what's the next pillar that makes sense to flow into?
Yeah, the next pillar is actually speaking from stage.
Yep.
And the value of that is you've been practicing and honing what I would consider your signature talk through your podcast. Hopefully you have been. I mean, at least that's the way that I teach it, is that you try to throw in some, episodes where it's just you talking, and you're getting an opportunity to articulate your thoughts in new ways that maybe you hadn't quite shaped before. And ultimately, these can translate into what becomes your signature talk. Yeah. And so the natural flow of speaking as well is that as you build these relationships with people are going to invite you to be on their podcast, which is an opportunity to speak. They're going to invite you to be on their live stages, which, again, another opportunity to speak. And so it's important to have that talk dialed in. And then, of course, when we talk about the monetization aspects, there are many ways to monetize your talk, anywhere from getting paid to speak to actually paying to be on someone else's stage, but knowing that you can make an offer from that stage and sell your goods and services too.
Yeah.
So it's a nice natural segue.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm in the live event industry, and I can tell you that that's how you really increase like the like, know, and trust factor. As much as I'm a digital marketer first, I know that live and that connection piece is essential. So I love that you kind of flow right into the live events. And I have never heard anyone say anything about practicing like their signature talk with the podcast. That's that's mind blowing for me. Yeah, I've never really heard it put that way. So a lot of times I see people come in and they'll work on the signature talk first, and that's what they'll focus on because they want to be a speaker. But to what you're saying is like there's actually a natural flow where you can do it all in one. It sounds very efficient to me.
Well, and that's the whole point of it. It's like if you want to go from the best kept secret to the go-to expert in a short period of time, it's important to do it with strategy in place, and it's important to do it, getting rid of all the little riffraff and the mistakes and figure out what is going to be the most impactful things that I can do right now. Yeah. And so that's kind of what the Authority Blueprint's all about. Yeah, well, I love that. It's impactful, and just like the word that comes to mind is like how efficient to grow using those pillars. Like it's like a stacking, and they just flow really well. So I think I know what you're going to say for the next pillar and why it makes sense, but I'm going to let you take it over. So next pillar. Sure. Yeah. Well, what happens for a lot of people, that especially people that I coach, a lot of them feel like, well, I'm not really a writer. I know I've got a book in me, but I hate putting pen to paper. Yeah. And for them, this actually becomes super natural flow, because you can actually take your podcast episodes and have them transcribed at a very reasonable rate. You could actually take those transcriptions and edit them yourself into a book, or you could even hand it over to an editor or a ghostwriter and have them transcribe those words that you've spoken into your book. So you never actually even have to put pen to paper. Wow. Now, I'm not saying that that is necessarily the best way, but I'm saying for somebody who doesn't like writing or typing or anything, do the talk, speak your book into existence. Yeah. And here's the other piece that I want to add, Danielle, about why it's important to do the book last. Because that's the other thing. I have a lot of people come to me with their book already kind of done, or maybe even published, and they might be sitting there with 5,000 or 10,000 books in their garage that they bought to sell, and they're having a hard time moving. But the worst part is that you get a book. So here's my book, and if someone were to just get my book, they would read that book, put it on a shelf, and our engagement is over. Yeah. Our connection is done. Yeah. However, if in the book, at the end of a chapter, you add something like, if you want to go deeper into this particular topic, tune into my podcast, episode 58, where myself and a guest really dig into this. So now your book is a reference back to the podcast. You could even mention, your virtual summits in there. And what I do is even here, and you probably can't read that with the shininess of it, but I even offer 2 free tickets to my live event with my book. Yeah. So anybody who gets my book, now they can access to these tickets and come to actually see me speak live. And so it creates this interwoven space that makes it so much more powerful than just a book where they read and they toss it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny that you say that, because I wrote a book and then did all of those things. And I did it a little bit out of order, but I'm like, oh, well, if I would have strategized this, I would have done the book last, exactly for why you said. Yeah. And also because I gain more powerful content as I speak more. Like, that's what really came forward, is that a lot of times we'll have those aha moments as we're talking to an outside person and just having the conversation. And that's like gold. Like, oh, why didn't I put that in my book? That would have been great.
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes you need someone else to bounce it off of and facilitate for that to be really powerful. So I love that piece of it as well, the creative piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. I love how this kind of weaves around in a circle.
Yeah, thank you. And it's the thing is, and the truth is, any of those elements individually, and there are people who specialize in each one individually. Yeah. They're powerful in and of themselves. Yeah. But when you combine them and interweave them, they become exponentially more powerful. Yeah. And that's what helps you reduce the time it takes to go from, just either just starting out, or maybe you're a big fish in a little pond, like people in your backyard know you really well, but you want to expand that audience out in the world in a bigger way. Yeah. This is a really great way to do that.
Yeah. And, I love the book aspect too at the end of it, that you use that to fill your live events and to get more podcast downloads and get them introduced to you more.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, and I tell a lot of the speakers I work with, I'm like, if you don't have a book yet, it really is time to get one. It is such an easy sell at events. Like, everybody has $20 on them and everybody wants something in hand. So they sell like hotcakes. Even if you're the speaker or the host, like, if you have your books on a table, people are going to pay for them. It's another revenue stream.
Absolutely. It is a great revenue stream. And when you put it in their hands, that when they read it, they're going to interconnect with you more through the other elements you've placed in the book.
It's another touch point on the customer journey.
Yes.
So the more touch points you can get, it's amazing. So, like, really what you're doing with the book at the end of all of it is that you're creating just another touch point, but not just one. Like, you have my book. Oh, here's another touch point. Listen to an episode of my podcast. Oh, here's another touch point. Come to my live event. So you're almost pre-educating people before they even come to a live event to work with you. So
exactly.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Awesome. Well, I know that we're going to save a little bit of time for you to talk about your next upcoming live event. So I want to give you some space for that. But thank you so much for just laying this out for us so beautifully on
absolutely.
Pillars. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a total pleasure. Yeah, and my live event is really a 3-day workshop where we dig into each of those pillars much more deeply. So as an example, in the world of podcasting, I teach you 7 ways to monetize your podcast. I teach you multiple ways to grow that audience, and then how to find great guests. So we really dig deeply into it. We even talk about, potential equipment and hosting platforms. So we really do a deep dive. And then how do we segue naturally, and what is the timing even potentially of shifting into doing a virtual summit? And again, where do we find guests for that, and how do we monetize it? And so I dig really deeply into each of these pillars over these 3 days, so that when someone walks away from the event, which is called Your Authority Blueprint Live, that they actually have an outline of where to start, how to progress through each of these elements, so that they can have their own authority blueprint to really build this powerful machine to, move them from that best kept secret to the go-to expert.
Yeah, and so many people are asking how do I do this, and how do people just come out of nowhere? And I think this is a really good, it flows so well. It's so efficient, right? And if you can implement it during a live event, geez, even better. Like you end up getting
Yeah,
your money worth and then some. So I love that you're doing
totally.
that with the live event. Okay, so I know I've got a link for everybody, and I'm going to put that below the video and at the end of
Excellent.
this, that where they can go and check it out. And can you tell us the dates again?
Well, yeah, it's April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Uh-huh.
And I want to add a couple of things about
Sure.
this. So one, right now, the tickets are on sale at $997 for
Okay.
early bird ticket price. But I want to offer your listeners a special
Nice.
deal. I want to just scholarship them. And before I offer that out, I want to say why. When I
Okay.
launched Consciously Speaking, my goal was to wake up the planet one person at
Yep.
a time, whatever it takes to have somebody just be a little more mindful and conscious about the way they go about their daily lives. And as I grew that, I realized there were a lot more people who also wanted to wake up the planet. And I started helping people to get their own podcast launch and build their authority so they could reach bigger crowds.
Yeah.
So it's creating this ripple effect. And so that's why I want a scholarship people in your tribe, because I know that they're also heart-centered entrepreneurs who are out there doing good stuff in the world. And so when you go to get your ticket, I
Yeah.
want you to use the code at checkout, pick a VIB ticket,
Hmm.
use the code SCHOLAR, SCHOLAR, all caps, and it will give you $900 off.
Awesome.
So literally, you're just paying the $97, which covers your food and materials, your lunches throughout the event. And so please use the code SCHOLAR at checkout and come as my guest, because I'm really wanting to help more people, get their message out to the world.
Yeah, beautiful. And so guys, at the end of the podcast episode, just listen for, I'll give you a bit.ly link if you're listening on the podcast, so you have it. For the video, I will show you the video. I'll show you the link, and also that awesome promo code so that they can get $900 off. And I just kind of want to take a moment and talk about with you, Michael, the importance of investing in yourself and investing in your
Mm,
future. So
yeah,
with live events, it does, especially with a 3-day live event, it does take time out of your schedule, but the productivity and the implementation cannot be replaced. Like getting a plan in place for building an authority in your niche is so worth your time. It's worth any travel expenses that you would incur. And Michael's making it really easy. On the tickets are, they're pretty much free, really. You're just paying for your food.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so investing in yourself so that you can really build your business. This is such a small, small amount, and the time is going to be well worth it. Because I know with 3-day events like this, they're hard. They don't come very often where you're actually implementing. So, and I'll let you add on to
Yeah, this
that.
is Yeah, well, I love that you mentioned that. It's not very often that they're implementing. There are a lot of events which are just like pitch fests, or they're, just a bunch of hype. This is actually a workshop.
Yeah.
And so people will be doing some work and getting stuff done at the event. And then the other elements that I want to add when you talk about, yeah, it is totally an investment of your time. I mean, money aside,
Yeah.
I'm asking you to give 3 days and travel to come and be with me here in Santa Cruz, California, and where the value is. It's like, Abraham Lincoln said, if you give him 6 hours to chop down a tree, he's going
Yeah.
to use the first 4 hours to sharpen the axe.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those opportunities where you sharpen your axe.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I go to about 14 events every year,
Yeah.
and I do it in addition to the information and the knowledge that I'm gaining and wisdom from going to these events and being trained. I'm also building my network, the connections that I make at events, the potential clients, the potential business partners is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so if for no other reason, I definitely would recommend going for that. And to make my event even a little more special, I actually have a lot of podcaster friends who will be here
Yeah.
at the event. And we have miniature recording booths built. So there will be some podcast interviewing happening on site even. So it's also great exposure, great networking. And so those reasons alone make it worth it. Even if
Absolutely.
the event's free and you spend money of your time, it's worth
Yeah.
it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. I go to as many events as I can. Um, yes, to learn the material too, and to learn something different, but more for just the experience and the networking and getting in front of people. And it's so fantastic because I go to these events and I meet people that I've talked to online or I've interviewed, and I
Hmm.
meet them in person. It's a totally different experience when I get to actually talk to them in person and really solidify that connection. So
Yeah.
if for anything, go and make the connections. It's always worth your time. Always. Yeah.
Totally. Well, you and I met at
Yeah.
events. We've been at 2 live events in the last 6 months.
Yeah, it took me a second
Yeah.
to get to you. I was like, oh, he's like a whole circle around him. I'm like, I'll talk to him eventually. So, and it's like, I knew I wanted to talk to you. I think we took it offline or took it online. But
Yep.
yeah,
After the event.
I've known about your work for at least a year now. So I get to finally meet you in person.
Yes,
It's
it was
always
fun.
great. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate your time with us and promoting the authority pillars. Just brilliant work, really brilliant work. And just you make it sound really easy and effective. So I always appreciate when our speakers can really break it down for people so that, I mean, this is bite-sized chunks too. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure being here and sharing with your tribe. I so appreciate what you're doing in the world, Danielle, and keep up the great work.
oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, until next time we see each other, Michael. So,
Yeah.
but everyone just, again, listen to the end of the episode if you're on the podcast. And if you're watching, we'll give you the links right there. So thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys on the next episode of Light at the End of the Funnel.